Good day everyone, I'm LionAD, and if you're watching this video, you probably know it's a follow-up for this Rapier Bleed build guide that you guys blew up. You'd also probably know that this follow-up is long overdue, however I've got a lot of good stuff to share, so I'm hoping it's well worth it. Firstly, let's cover what has changed because we kind of received a lot of nerfs. Desert Sunrise is a consumable stackable with attribute food, which reduces the duration of damage over time effects by 17.5%. I actually released a video on why this food is harmful for PvP, but alas the release went forward, so I guess it's a big hey fuck you, let's reduce your entire build's damage by 17.5% even though you are already underpowered. The only silver lining here is that I don't think most PvPers bothered to use this in OPR and arenas, however I'm pretty sure nearly everyone in Wars does. Next nerf, the haste and instant stamina on evade now only applies when actually evading an attack, which I think is a good nerf to combat the slipperiness of lifestyle Rapier users, but this still hurts us a bit and makes evade feel a bit weird, but it's not the end of the world. And finally, if you preferred Riposte over evade, the homing was increased to be more likely to only hit a single target, and the hitbox of the counterattack was reduced so that you don't stun everyone 360 degrees around you. Before, if you had several enemies on you in a circle, one Riposte would stun them all, but now you only stun one or two at best, removing some escape potential in those 1vx scenarios. Okay, I'm not sure why I said finally because that's not the last nerf, there are more, not related to the Rapier though. If you're hit with a melee attack as a light or medium user, your dodge distance will be reduced by 20%, which makes it a lot harder for us to survive when you have a hatchet on your back doing 1,000,000 damage a second and you're just not able to roll away. If I'm being completely honest, PvP feels pretty bad this patch unless you're a greatsword hatchet or a ranged dex. So unless you want to rip your hair out trying to have fun on this game, just slap on a greatsword and walk through people. I wish I was exaggerating when I say 2 hits from a greatsword yields more damage than setting up bleed stacks and executing them, so it just feels like there's no point being methodical or tactical when you could just use the meta weapons for 10 times better results. But alas, the Rapier build is not dead, but it requires some reinvention which I'm here today to provide because after all, playing video games is about having fun, and if you don't want to use the greatsword hatchet because you don't find it fun, you don't have to, you can use a Rapier, even though greatsword hatchet just everyone. The last year of crosscut, boom, where's your health? Where's your health? Nowhere. Okay, rant over. Also, before I talk about Heartrunes, I forgot to plug my Twitch. So follow my Twitch, I'm actually streaming now. I've been meaning to do this for months. Twitch.tv/LionAD with a double D. What Heartrune should we use? I think the Heartrune choice for this build is purely preference. So just run what you feel confident with and what you will enjoy. Detonate, Stoneform, and Vines would probably be the better options. Myself personally, I run Mending Stoneform. The only drawback of this is that your outgoing damage will be reduced by 20% for this duration. So the good part of that is you can pop Mending Stoneform and then use your Flourish and Finish and not have your damage reduced. Because if you remember from the last video, the Empower and Rend and damage increases and reductions, those that are active at the time of applying the bleed will affect your finish damage. But if it's present at the time of doing the Flourish and Finish, it will not affect the bleed damage. So for example, if you have Mending Stoneform active when you apply 2 bleed stacks, those 2 bleed stacks will have the damage reduced by 20%. So try to not apply bleed stacks while you have Mending Stoneform active. Okay, Runeglass Gems, fun. This is actually a massive nerf to Rapier bleed builds. You might not think it is, but it is. The first major reason is the fact that we don't really have any ways to increase our outgoing damage like our opponents can. There is no Runeglass Gem that you can put in your armor to increase your bleed damage like others would for their physical or elemental damage, and if you want to use a frozen opal in your Rapier for example, your bleed damage will now receive a 12% increase rather than a 15%. Overall, it is probably a net increase when you use this new 8% damage over time Runeglass, however it does come at the cost of some bleed damage. Next reason why Runeglass Gems are an indirect nerf to us is because when enemies use them in their armor to increase their damage towards us, it lowers the protection that their gemstones provide. The problem for us is that their gems never added any resistance to bleed damage, so while they will be more susceptible to other forms of damage, to us, our opponents are just receiving a free damage boost with no defensive drawback, because we cannot exploit this defensive drawback without bleed damage. I do love Runeglass Gems, I think it adds a lot of new ways to play the game, it just sucks that it kind of cucks this build in particular along with all the other cucks that we received this patch. Anyway, now all the bad negative stuff is over, let's talk about build updates. So for everyone saying you prefer Ice Gauntlet or you prefer Riposte or you prefer Fire Staff or you prefer this, etc, etc, this video should cover every single one of your questions because it is going to be a 3-in-1 where I cover Rapier Ice Gauntlet, Rapier Hatchet and Rapier Fire Staff. I have heard of more kind of funky combinations like Rapier Blunderbuss, Rapier Spear, which I could cover in the future, but not right now. Before I get into the nuances of each individual build, I'm going to cover some general pieces of information that are important across all three of them, so please listen carefully, listen up, open your ears. 250 intelligence is a requirement for 30% additional duration on bleeds, meaning a 30% increase to damage. Because the Rapier scales primarily with dexterity and secondarily with intelligence, and we are just using an opal and no tier 2 inchem or anything like that, our physical thrust damage will lose some value, but overall this is the best way to ensure the highest bleed damage. On screen are your attribute split options for this build, so it will always have 250 intelligence and then whatever con you add, you take away from dexterity. The row titled Damage versus 50 con shows how close your damage is to what it would be at 50 con. So at 100 con for example, your damage will be 92.61% of the 50 con damage. That's a 7.39% damage drop. If you go to 200 con, our damage will be 74.12% of the 50 con option, meaning a 25.88 decrease in damage. Since comparing your damage to 50 con isn't always a viable means of comparison since 50 con can be unfeasible, the next row instead compares each damage option to that of the previous, so at 200 con you'll be getting 87.83% of the damage you would at 150 con. At 150 con, you'll be getting 91.13% of the damage you would at 100 con. The reason why the largest gap occurs between 150 and 200 con is because that is when you are losing the 50 dexterity points that go between 50 and 100, which will have the least amount of diminishing returns and the highest value. Take this information how you will and pick whatever con amount you feel is best. I will be going into more detail for each secondary combination. A ring with bloodletting is a requirement, as is hardy if you do not have 150 dexterity. Get invigorated punishment if you can, and remember mortal empowerment unfortunately will not grant you stacks on kills with bleed damage, and this is intended. It's a shame we can't use the mortal empowerment playstyle because devs don't want people getting kills with random damage over time effects to be rewarded, despite our playstyle being anything but random and closer to precise and purposeful. Amulet and earring choice is up to you, but I recommend the Champion's Amulet for the Shirking Empower for extra bleed damage, and my earring is shown on screen. Please invest in Refreshing Toast, Healthy Toast, it is so nice to have. You will not need Deadly Flourish or Keen Tondo, but are free to take them on your armor. Please do not take either of them on your weapon. I mentioned this in my last video, but Deadly Flourish does not increase your bleed damage or your finish hit. Deadly Flourish only increases the first horizontal swipe called the flourish. It won't increase the secondary thrust, it won't increase the bleed. That is why Deadly Flourish is not really necessary at all. As for your general armor perks, you will need Fortified Resilient alongside whichever perks you prefer, whether it be Shirking Fortification, Freedom, Refreshing or whatever. You only need a 2-perk rapier with either Omnidirectional Evade or Sundering Riposte with Keenly Empowered. My 2 rapiers are shown on screen currently. Reminder that when running with Evade, you want to try to roll and evade just before your Tondo to proc the Opal and Omnidirectional Evade damage boosts. Unfortunately, trying to squeeze this in, especially with the brief Tondo cast time, gives the enemy time to dodge, so just be wary of that. For everyone asking about Riposte over Evade, the objective fact is that Evade is the higher risk, higher reward option over Riposte. If you try to tell me that Sundering Riposte is better offensively than the instant on-demand 20% empower on Evade, you are wrong. Argue with the wall, not with me, the wall, or the comments. Go there. Boost my reach, boost my engagement. You can't guarantee a riposte rend like you can an evade empower, and remember that your bleed damage is based off the rend and empower present at the time you apply the bleed, not when you're doing the flourish and finish. So you can't just set up 2 or 3 bleed stacks and then pop the riposte rend because the rend will only apply if it was there at the time of applying the bleed. The appeal of Rend over Empower is the fact that you want to make the most of both your 50% Empower cap and 30% Rend cap. However, the good thing with this build is that even with Omnidirectional Evade, Shirking Empower, and Keenly Empowered active, you are only reaching the Empower cap and none of it is going to waste. Both are good options and pick whichever ability you wish, just make sure you either have Omnidirectional Evade or Sundering Riposte on your Rapier. In comparison to my last video where I mainly showcased how I played the Hatchet Rapier and didn't really show anything else, this video I'm going to be offering a huge range of playstyles and build options for you to pick which is best suited for yourself, because in the face of these nerfs I think the best way to enjoy Rapier Bleed build is to just do it for a way that you feel is right, not the way that some YouTuber feels is right. But also just don't do something stupid. Alright, so the Ice Rapier variant has actually been my favourite lately because the Ice Gauntlet just brings so much to the table. Let's get into it. My advice starting with attributes is to probably go with the 150 con option, as it grants you some stability while also enabling pretty good damage. If you want to go 100 con, no one is stopping you, and if you want to go 200 con, you will feel a lot more secure but put out a bit less damage naturally. The Ice Gauntlet abilities are your choice, but the only thing I'd say is that Ice Shower is the must-have pick. Ice Shower is so good because you can use it defensively or offensively as you please, and it's a super easy way to get bleed stacks. Additionally, it applies a 10% rend, slow, root, etc. And I recommend running Deadly Frost alongside Ice Shower, whether it be on your armor or your weapon. I personally love Tomb for the extra safety, but if you just want to go crazy and don't want the defense, drop it, I guess. Healing Tomb is recommended. If you want more burst, go Ice Spike. It's a solid choice. Ice Refresh is not necessary, but also keep in mind that you're going to be dealing less damage since you're only 250 int and not 300 int. Ice Pylon is great because if their attention is split to the pylon, it opens a window for you to stack bleeds, and if they ignore it, it's free damage and ult charge. Pylon Burst is heavily recommended if you're running with Ice Pylon. And I'm not even going to mention Wind Chill. So essentially run whatever combination of abilities you want as long as you have Ice Shower. My suggestion is Ice Shower, Pylon and Tomb, and I use Frostwall since Keen and Vicious are great for my Pylon, and I'll take all the cooldown reduction on Shower I can get. Like I said in the general advice, the choice between Evade and Riposte is yours. I typically use Evade because I do have the Ice Tomb to fall back on, so I can be a bit aggressive and try to get as much damage as I can. Now let's talk about my original invention, the invention that started the revolution, the Rapier Hatchet. I'd hate to say it, but I've fallen a bit out of love with Hatchet. I think it still has its place in this build and I could go back to it, but right now I'm just feeling the Ice Gauntlet because it simply does more and it's a lot more well-rounded. Essentially, if you see me on stream or in future videos using a Rapier Hatchet, it's a good sign. If you don't see me ever using it again, it's a bad sign. The skill tree is shown on screen now, and the main thing for this build is making sure you have refreshing distancing throw on your Hatchet, as well as keen speed if you can, despite it being nerfed to no longer persist on weapon swap, which is another nerf, and so sad. The entire premise behind the Hatchet is using it as a safety net to compensate for running 100 con, which in hindsight is a bit too low and I'd probably go to 150 con even with the Hatchet. But anyway, in OPL with the insanely long sight lines and gap close of light melees, Berserk, Defy Death and social distancing sometimes just isn't enough to get you away. Think of the Hatchet's kit as running away, but think of the Ice Gauntlet's kit as pushing back, turning a defensive Ice Shower into an opportunity to land massive damage and just giving you more presence. If I ever were to try something crazy like a 50 con bleed build, the Hatchet would be my go-to for sure for that Defy Death, and I'm not saying it's bad, I'm just liking the Ice Gauntlet more at the moment. If the Rapier Hatchet does interest you a lot, just check out the video card on the top right. That was the original video I made like 2 months ago. Alrighty, initially I wasn't going to include the Fire Staff variation in this video, however I've been seeing it around and have received a few messages about it, so here we go. The Void Gauntlet and Fire Staff are pretty similar in terms of pairings with the bleed build, so if you want to apply this information to the Void Gauntlet, feel free to. I just didn't test the Void Gauntlet, but I did test the Fire Staff. Like I said previously, melees are just so dominant right now, and the Fire Staff will leave you especially vulnerable to them, so I definitely recommend the Ice Gauntlet over it, and I definitely felt the Fire Staff's weakness while I was trying it. Since the Fire Staff does not have any defensive tools, I encourage 200 con, 150 con if you really like. On your Fire Staff, you have a lot of perk options between weapon perks like Stable Incinerate and Empowering Fireball, Vicious, Keen, Flame Attunement, Keenly Powered and more, and the abilities you want to take once more depend on your playstyle. Fireball is a complete must-have, which is no surprise. It's just very quick, easy and high damage, really good for following up on targets after a bleed burst. Do not run Meteor Shower with the Rapier bleed build, there is just no synergy and it will not be useful. Incinerate can be a really good follow-up for Riposte if you wish to run something like that. Stable Incinerate is heavily recommended. Flamethrower can be a really good way to apply pressure and damage between your Tondo stacks if you wish to. I did actually try this and it felt really good at times, but other times when I try to stay close and apply that pressure, the melees would just push back. The slow ticks of Flamethrower and the slow application of bleeds, I would just get stomped on, I'd get trampled over. Burnout is a good option for mobility, however it's drawn back by its long wind up, but still pretty good. Efficient Burnout is, you can take it if you want, it's not going to really make much of a difference, but it is nice. And Pillar is a solid pick if you enjoy using it, with Refreshing Pillar being heavily recommended. I went for Fireball, Burnout and Incinerate, which was pretty fun. I would either use the Riposte to set up another bleed stack or I would use it to get a free Incinerate, but even then, after all that in my testing, to me Ice Gauntlet is still just a lot better than the Fire Staff for this build. And Fire Staff, it is overall pretty weak right now, but especially weak when paired with the Rapier bleed. But if you do like it, like no hate. That is all for the Rapier bleed build update. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm and your patience. I hope I answered all of your questions and provided some fun inspiration. If you have any questions or something to say, feel free to leave a comment or contact me in my Discord server, linked in the description. If you also want to keep up with me on my other socials, my Twitter, shown on screen, LionAD with a triple D, because single D and double D were taken. It's also in the description. My Twitch, I'm going to be streaming. Please head over there and follow. I hope I didn't cram in too much unnecessary stuff, but I do try to load these with as much info as possible, and with cramming in all this info comes a lot of time from writing scripts and editing, so your support, likes and comments, etc. really go a long way. Thanks again, and I will catch you in the next one.